Hey, welcome back to Worth 1000 Words. We are on episode 20 now. And if you couldn't tell by my festive sweater, this is the holiday episode. It is the final episode of Worth 1000 Words before the new year. And so I thought I would do something a little bit out of the ordinary. There are no murders that are happening here in this story. There are no demons. There are no dragons. There is no blood. If you're not into that, I hope you stick with me because it is a cozy little story, and I think that it is something that anyone can enjoy. At least I hope. There is some sadness here because I can't tell the story without it, apparently. But I think it'll give you a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, I hope. And as you can see, my sweater isn't the traditional Christmas sweater. It is of Krampus with a poor little boy screaming, being taken away. So there you go. That says all you need to know about me. But anyway, on to the music. I needed something to match the artwork, and the artwork is very peaceful. It's a place where you just want to kind of take the world in just second by second and savor every bit of it. So I went back to a band that I hadn't listened to in some time, and that band is called Hammock, and this is from their latest release called Silencia. I listened to a little bit of it beforehand while I was doing some other stuff, and I said, this is it. I think this is going to guide me in the direction I needed to go because this story was difficult for me to tell. There's no apparent conflict in the image, but I'll talk more about that on the next part when we look at the artwork itself. With all that said, I hope you've enjoyed the series so far. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I'm going to continue to do it into the new year and hopefully week after week and never stopping and hopefully amass a massive volume of short stories that I will release in print. I'm thinking a yearly collection or something like that. Anyway, without further ado, let's check out today's artwork. Today's artwork is titled Snowy Harbor, and it is by a freelance concept artist named Sławek Federchuk from Warsaw, Poland. And I told you this one was different. I purposely wanted to choose something that was vaguely holiday themed, and while there's no Christmas carolers, Santa Claus, reindeer, Christmas trees, or anything of that sort, I believe that at least captured the feeling of it. What I really like about this one is that it's more traditional in nature. It's very loose, which I really enjoy those kind of paintings more than the overly detailed ones. And we just see a figure near this dock by himself by this small boat. There's a few birds flying above the water, but really nothing left in sight. I knew this one was going to be challenging because there's really no conflict to speak of. It's as if the artist just wanted to capture this beautiful morning moment. And I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to pick something that didn't have demons or dragons or skeletons or anything horrific or dark on the surface. And I'm going to do my best to keep this one as light as possible because I think it's simple to go to the dark places, especially when you're dealing with fantasy art or science fiction. But there is nothing dark to see at all in this image. Sławek, thank you for this beautiful artwork. I appreciate the challenge. I look forward to seeing what you come up with next. So I encourage everyone to check out his profile on ArtStation in the link below. Well, let's see what I came up with. The sound of snow crunching under the boy's boots was his favorite thing, even more than popping bubble wrap, and that only came a few times a year. People here didn't have much need for the world beyond the harbor, so shipments were seldom. Snow came once a year, so his comparison wasn't truly fair. From the time of the first snow to the melting slush before spring, months would go by. Each one of those months filled with many days, and each one of those days another chance for snow. He wasn't a boy anymore, but it was still his favorite thing. Ellis, the man, too much man, Sarah used to say, and would say it now if she were still here. Patted over to the calendar on the wall, the month of January. The year didn't matter, because years didn't matter anymore. The picture did. It was an illustration of an old schooner at open sea, its sails fluffed with wind. Ballpoint scribbles depicted a man, a woman, and a young girl waving at the figurative camera. He didn't look back to his bed to see the other half empty. Not today. He could tell from the warm colors nudging their way through the curtains to stain his floor the most beautiful gold that he couldn't sour it with memories. And besides, Sarah had left him something to make sure no other day would be sour. "Anna!" Ellis shouted. Not even old Gus, their old cat, who was more dog than cat, stirred from his slumber. "Now where is that girl?" Ellis went to the door and put on his boots, jacket, and hat before grabbing his snow poles. Anna's boots and jacket were missing, but her hat was here, next to the peg where his was. Too high for her, he supposed. Ellis stepped onto the porch and waited on the last step before his favorite part. He anticipated that his favorite part would have been slightly spoiled by a little girl who shouldn't have left the house alone, but it wasn't. The road, for as far as he could see, was untouched powder. Gus sidled next to him and demonstrated downward dog in case Ellis thought he had any cat left in him. His tongue sagged from his mouth and his tail wagged. "I swear you don't know what the hell you are." Ellis visored his eyes to get a better look. He had to have missed print somewhere unless the girl had grown wings. He checked the side and back of the house to see if she had taken an alternate route. None he could see. Ellis returned to the bottom step, his toes hovering over the edge. 4 or 5 inches at least, maybe more if he was lucky. He checked the carved notches on the rail post to confirm. They were marked with lines going all directions, making an unreadable mess of the ones he had placed. He looked at Gus. "That you? By God, maybe you finally remembered what you are." Ellis dipped his toe into the white, lowering it slowly until he felt solid ground. You had to take this part slow. Respect what nature had given you. And he did, never getting tired of it. He let his heel rest, and that was the part that really made it sing. The toe-to-heel crunch. His other foot partook in the satisfaction. Then, one foot in front of the other, he repeated it down to where he needed to be if he wanted to eat tonight. "Anna!" he called, about halfway to the docks. A bird or two on a leafless branch had his attention. Worry wasn't something he felt very often, but something about this wasn't right. Sarah had always told him he was too soft on Anna. "She's a girl, Ellis, not a wild animal." After which Anna would leap from a hiding place, howling and cawing and growling, as if she were an amalgam of all manner of creature. They laughed together, all of them. The smile from the memory didn't last long for Ellis. The heaviness on his chest and the dryness in his mouth was back stronger than ever. He knocked on Jack's cabin door on the way down. No response. The windows were glazed with ice, and not one fractured blotch looked anything like Jack. Ellis ran the rest of the way to the dock. Maybe someone down there had seen her. The only company he had was a string of gulls searching the water for breakfast. Ellis turned around. The prints he had made took him back in time. A solitary line that led to a porch that sat below a window Sarah would wave at him through every morning. That window was black. "Anna!" His voice broke. Everything he saw was a trap that had taken her. The shattered skin of ice off the dock with a hole just her size. A pile of snow and rock that had fallen from its weight. Her cairn. He sucked in a deep breath that turned to ice, and he hacked it back at his feet. "Daddy, are you okay?" Ellis hid his tears with another cough, rested his hands on his knees, not ready to look up at her, because he knew what face he'd see. Who was he kidding? He couldn't look away. Anna's mittened hands were on the deck rail, her unruly, hatless hair dancing in the breeze. Apple cheeks, the color of apples, rising to show him her smile as soon as she knew he was fine. "Why?" Ellis said. "How?" "You shouldn't have left without me. You know how dangerous the road can be. Why didn't you wait for me?" Alice was glad his words hadn't taken away her smile. I saved it for you, Daddy, she said, pointing at the snow where his tracks led back to the empty house. How or why no longer mattered. All was righted. I think the most notable thing here is my blinking cursor and a blank page. Yes, this was challenging. I'm not going to deny that in the least, but I love the image, and I think these are a great opportunity to do something different and hopefully stretch myself and learn something from it. And so the first thing that came to mind for me was maybe going back, making this a generational kind of story, where maybe this was the father passing something down to the son. And I don't know if they go down to the docks and they have some kind of tradition or something. So I kind of started there. I started this story with a boy, and I did not know where this was heading at all. And it took me quite a while, I believe way past the midpoint, before I knew what was going to happen. But as a boy myself, I think the sound of crunching snow was always kind of cool, and so I started there. I thought that maybe, as kids really find joy in the smallest things, and that's the first thing that came to mind. And so I went with it. And here in these first two paragraphs, I'm going back in time, and I'm doing a little bit of world building. I'm trying to establish what this small harbor is, and it's a small town. Not a lot is going on or ever goes on. And then I decided to, now he's going to be a man. So I'm having this guy waddling over to the calendar on the wall. The month being January. I'm trying to keep this as, I don't know, like I said, kind of some kind of chronology is important here. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the general the generational thing I spoke of yet, or something else. But I'm still essentially sketching at this point. I named the man Ellis. I don't know why that came to mind. I just, it sounded like a cool name, and then once I put it to the page, it reminded me of, I believe his name is Warren Ellis. He's a musician. He does a lot of film scores. But once again, doing some world building here. I've established our hero Ellis, that he was married or had a woman named Sarah at one point, some kind of relationship. But I said the year didn't matter because years didn't matter anymore. And that's really planting the seed that maybe he's not completely happy. And it further is demonstrated by the half empty bed. And then I decided to give them a daughter, or him a daughter, I should say. What I wanted to do is I wanted to have, where I'm writing that right now, the picture did. It was a vast mountain range. I completely changed that. But I wanted to have that create some kind of emotion or significance to the story, and I believe it does when I change it to a boat later on, where Anna presumably has drawn these figures of her family on this boat sailing the wide open sea. So take that as you may. And here. Once again, just putting words on the page, have no idea where I'm going. And I think right here, this just popped in my head. Not even old Gus, their old cat that was more dog than cat, didn't stir from a slumber. So I think things like that are interesting, where you just kind of, you throw out these lines that give so much character. I think just in that single line, you're wondering like, well, what the hell is this cat like? That's weird. And I think that's what I love about writing. In something as brief as a single line, you can throw these interesting character moments, and I do bring up old Gus a little bit later as well. And we have Ellis here, kind of just talking to himself, looking around for his daughter. He notices that her boots and jacket are missing, but her hat was there. And then I use this image. I should say I use this image of the hat remaining to illustrate her height without saying how old she was. And I think those are the kind of clues that you can show the reader information without spelling it out. So I really love doing stuff like that, and I love it when other writers do as well. Rather than saying, "Oh, Anna was 6 years old," or whatever, it says, "Oh, her hat was left behind because she's too short to get it." And here I am back at the calendar. I decided that I was going to add a boat there because if they live at a harbor, I'm assuming that boats are a big part of their lives. And I have ballpoint scribbles depicted a man, a woman, and a young girl waving at the figurative camera. So this kind of also seeds a little bit of sadness into the reader's mind, I think, because we do know that Sarah is no longer with us, whether she left or she's dead. We're not sure, and I think that illustration is just kind of a little reminder of that. And I changed it to an illustration. I don't know why. I think I don't know. Photo just had less weight for me. And here we are, where Ellis, as a grown man, is he's anticipating his favorite part about this snow. He still holds it with him, even though he is no longer a boy. And I like that. I think we carry these things through our lives, even though they may be as insignificant as something as freshly fallen snow and the sound of it crunching underneath our boot. It was special to him for some reason, and so he chose to. Well, I mean, he's just enjoying this moment. And here we go with Gus again, and I'm illustrating a little bit more how he's more of a dog than a cat, with his tongue sagging out of his mouth and his tail wagging. And I thought it'd be funny too to have dogs, as you know, they love to do downward dog as they stretch, and I thought that would be a cool little image to put in your head, and as well as a callback. So he demonstrated downward dog in case Gus, but that should be Ellis, thought he had any cat left in him. So we say goodbye to Gus, and he's Ellis is starting to get a little bit worried. Maybe he's starting to look for his daughter, wondering where she is. And I had to make it to where there were no footprints in the snow, because that would have been obviously a dead giveaway where she had gone. And so it's kind of pricking at him a little bit. It's like he's a little bit worried, not quite yet, and so he dips back into his boyhood fantasy, or his ritual where he steps on the untouched snow. And I had another little, I should say, character bit where he carved notches into this rail post. I was trying to take it back to, when parents do that for their kids to measure their height. I was going to have a callback or some kind of image there for that, but I just stuck with the way to snow, the way to measure the height of the snow. But then once again, I brought Gus back into it, and it's a funny little callback because, as we know, cats like to scratch things up, posts in particular, or corners of couches, and so that was kind of the closure of the Gus is a cat is a dog situation. And I think it's really fun and important to have those moments in your stories, right? It just makes everything feel more believable. And even though we only have a few lines describing Gus in this entire story, I think we know who he is and what he's like. And here's the moment where he he slowly steps down into the snow, and I tried to stretch that moment out a little bit because he's taking some satisfaction in it. But he's brought back to his daughter, and he calls out again. And I wanted to illustrate these branches you see on the right side. Now there are no birds in them, but that doesn't matter. I think I added that little element, and I wanted to have you know I love those moments in movies when we have animals kind of regarding humans, and but they're all alone. So but and here we go. He's worried. Worry is not something he feels very often. but he is worrying about it here, and we get a little call back with Sarah, something that she would tell him all the time. She's not a wild animal. And then against more characterization from Anna, showing how she is acting like a wild animal. And I think those moments are really great here because they're illustrating the relationship between this family and doing characterization work all the same. You have Sarah who's scolding him, but she's never been one to scowl long, meaning she's usually a happy person all the time, and despite Ellis's seemingly carelessness nature, she's not angry. But we see the heaviness on his chest and the dryness in his mouth are back stronger than ever, meaning he is definitely getting worried now. And I see this little cabin down about halfway beyond this little rock wall, and I imagined a man named Jack lives there, and so he's going down to check it out, and I really had this image of these frosted windows that are kind of refracting everything inside it in a blurred way, and then that's why I said the windows were glazed with ice and not one fractured blotch looked anything like Jack. And so now we have Ellis running, so I'm escalating the action. I've created some kind of conflict finally, being his missing daughter. And I know I said I wasn't going to get dark, and I don't, as you know, because you've listened to the story already, but I did have removed his wife from the equation. So hopefully that's not too sad or depressing for you. I think it's still a pretty happy story, at least to me. But I do dip back into the sadness here and again. So the prince took him back in time, a solitary line that led to a porch. So uh, the solitary line is sort of, it's describing his loneliness essentially, and it's leading all the way back up to his house, which is a porch, and then I talk about it being a window, which is black, meaning it's empty. Sarah is no longer there. I was toying around with more characterization in my head about maybe he drank coffee, she didn't drink coffee, but I went with something much more simply because I know I'm over 800 words now, so I need to wrap this up. And so now Anna, his voice broke. We can see that it's becoming more intense. His worry is rising, and he's noticing all the things. And I have a daughter, and I think that any parent thinks this when they don't know where their kid may be. Hopefully, that doesn't happen to you very often. Uh, I'm, I'm I'm pretty good about it. But anyway, everything he saw was a trap. So that shattered skin of ice off the dock was a hole just her size. A pile of snow and rock had fallen from its weight, her cairn. So immediately he goes to the worst situation, and that's what those illustrations are. Is that he can just look at these elements in the environment and attribute her doom to them, and that's what the object of that paragraph was. And this next line, he sucked in a deep breath that turned to ice. That it reminded me of an old science teacher. I said he worked on a fishing boat, and he said that you can never breathe in really heavy when it's too cold. Otherwise, your saliva and the air turns to ice. That's what that was. And finally, I bring in, Daddy, are you okay? Anna is fine. Ellis hides his tears with a cough. Doesn't want to show her that he was actually worried or upset. And then I illustrate Anna here. She's standing on we don't see her in the image, obviously, but that was my little added element. She's standing on the side with her hands on the rail, and her unruly hair dancing in the breeze because she does not have a hat. She forgot it. So that's another little callback. I think it's nice when you seed those things, right? So I think it's important to not just establish that, but then to have the character notice it. And apple cheeks, the color of apples, rising to show him her smile as soon as she knew he was fine. And he just kind of sputters out some words, and why, you shouldn't have left without me, as parents do. But I successfully called it all back. She knew his love for, stepping into the fresh snow, and she said, "I saved it for you," and all was right. So that is the end of the story. Essentially, I'm just going back and editing and fitting in some things, toying with the beginning. I said, well, maybe I should just say, Ellis from the beginning. But I think what I wanted to do, and what I changed it back to, I should say, is I left it kind of omniscient. I wanted the camera to be kind of slowly coming down into this little sleepy town, and started from high up before we get into Ellis's head, almost as like one of those old timey TV shows or movies when maybe you have a narrator. Although The Devil All the Time, the Netflix movie, did that with the author's narration. So I kind of imagined something like that. I don't know. The image just gave me that vibe, I guess. But overall, I was pretty happy. I was really worried, and I was off to a little bit of a rough start, but it came through. But removing words at this point, that's about it. But I think really what I learned here is, more than anything, because as I've mentioned plenty of times, if you've watched any of these videos, a lot of times the ending of the story is apparent to me, and the conflict right from the get go. This one, however, was not at all, and but I still discovered it, and I think that's important. Is just go, right, just start the story. Don't worry about where you're going all the time. I think a lot of times you figure it out as you go. Now, I'm not saying don't outline ever, but don't ever feel if you don't have an outline, you can't start something, because you never know what you might find. Yeah, still playing around. I was up to 1,000, a little over, and then I finally make it to the end, looking for one word. Usually this part isn't very challenging for me, but this time it was. Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I'm so glad you made it. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed my analysis. If you are a writer, and just checked out my thought process behind it, and I think that it's important even for me to talk to myself, as I read the words again, because it just reinforces what I think I learned during the exercise, and hopefully you guys get something from it as well. So I think overall I learned that I don't always have to tell a horrific story. That's the number one thing I did learn, and also further emphasizing the fact that you don't need an outline for these kinds of things. I think that the artwork is enough to really guide you on the way, and don't be afraid of that ticking clock. I mean, maybe you don't work on a timer like I do. I do that just to document the process for you, so you know I'm not bullshitting you, and how long it takes me to do it. And in looking back, there are some definite things I would have edited in this, mostly grammatical. That's part of it. I mean, it's okay. I'll get that done. As I mentioned in the first part of the video, releasing these as a collection in volumes. That's when that'll happen. That's when I'll take a nice second, third, fourth pass on these things, and polish them up to the best of my ability. But anyway, from a craft standpoint, there's a few things that I really learned or took out of this, is that how easily it is to do character building in very few lines, and the different methods there are to do that. And so I think for me, the best method that I found was when I gave the cat the characteristic of a dog. And now, why is that interesting? Because it's ironic. And Mr. Matt Bird, who wrote one of my favorite books on writing crafts, says that irony is such an important thing. Now, I don't think I was intentionally making it ironic, but that's the thing that came to mind. And we know that Gus is a bit of a strange creature, and he's not a normal cat. And almost everything you needed to know about Gus was in that single line. And I think because everything, animals are so familiar to us. To us, dogs are familiar, cats are familiar. So when you throw someone a curveball like that and say a dog is like a cat or a cat is like a dog, you immediately have everything you need to know. And I know I went a little bit deeper with the notches on the post, but I just need to remind myself that don't go into too much detail. You don't need to always go into a lot of detail. Sometimes things like that are better left to be simple. And I know that sentence is telling, it's not showing, but I think that's another great example of when to tell and not to show. It's to convey information quickly because you don't want to muddy up the pacing of the story. Now, a lot of times when you want to tell and show, or when you want to show time passing, because you don't need to show every movement of the character. I think that's unimportant. But when to do those things, that's up to your discretion, and really, it's a gut kind of thing. And I think that the more you read and the more you write and the more you work with editors, you'll understand. I guess the second thing I really enjoyed, and I wasn't sure where it was going to end up, but I started with the sound of crunching snow and Ellis's love for it from way back when he was way back when he was a boy, and his daughter gave him that gift again. You know, she knew her dad loved it so much, and even though she ran away from him, or I should say, left the house too early and didn't tell him where she was going. It all worked out in the end. So that really was the conflict. I had to have some kind of crisis, right? You always have to have some kind of crisis, and I think another element I really enjoyed in the story, looking back, is when he looked back to his house and saw his solitary line of footprints leading back to the porch, which sat below a window that Sarah used to wave out to him. And I think that was uh, that line to me really told a lot about the character and their past, and again, it reminded me of how you can world build and character build and almost have some flashbacks with very few words. And arguably, those are the most powerful instances in a story, really, right? It's not the paragraph upon paragraph upon paragraph of detailed description. It's these one note punches that really hammer home. So, and in fact, it is Christmas Day. I'm wrapping this up on Christmas Day. I intend to edit this and upload it because I procrastinated once again. I'm trying to do these on Fridays now because of Fiction Friday, apparently, is a thing on Twitter. I think it's a great way to hopefully spread the word on these and share it with other writers and readers like yourselves. So I know most of you are going to get this at the end of your day or even the day after Christmas. So I really hope everybody had a great holiday. Thanks for watching these videos and commenting and liking them. I really appreciate it. And I think this was a good one to wrap the year up with. I will be back, as you know, next week with another one, like I am every week, barring any unforeseen circumstances. But that is the plan moving forward indefinitely at this point. I hope you enjoy it. As always, looking for suggestions. If you have any artwork you'd like me to write a story to, please drop it in the comments below. And on this fine Christmas day, I hope you are curling up with a good book or watching a great movie, just enjoying storytelling in one of its many mediums, because that's what I'm going to be doing as soon as I get this video edited and uploaded. Thanks for hanging out with me, and keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye. If you'd like to read this story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't add anything else, promise. Thanks again.